He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
I always say this, mental health, the presence of good mental health or the lack of good mental health for each individual, to me, it's more of a social issue rather than a disease or deficit issue.
This is Here Now, and I'm Kadamri Raghukumar. Sandra Szvenyika is a mental health nurse, and she joins me in this final episode of a 4-part conversation with Black women with inspiring journeys in New Zealand, navigating successful careers, identity and culture in their new adopted home. Sandra was born and raised in Zimbabwe, and her story in New Zealand begins in 2007.
I had just finished my university degree, my nursing studies in the UK. My husband at the time had also finished his studies, and we had a very young, our daughter was a baby at the time. And we were looking around at the lifestyle that we had in the UK, which was basically wake up, work, give your child to someone else to look after for the day, come home exhausted, not have much time with your child, and go to bed and wake up the next morning and do it all again. The story of capitalism, right? Wherever you are in the world. And we looked around and thought, there's got to be a way that we can have a better balance here. And so we started looking at, beyond the borders of the UK. We applied to different places that we thought looked like we could have that kind of lifestyle, that kind of work-life balance. And New Zealand was one of those places. And literally we landed here because it was the first place we got offered jobs. So it could have been anywhere, but we landed in Aotearoa. What I found when I got here was in New Zealand back then felt very much, it reminded me so much of home, my home of origin. And I'm not sure what it was. I think it was the way people just seemed more relaxed and the pace felt slower. Yeah, and I think maybe things like Maori culture and Pacifica cultures, collective cultures like mine, I immediately kind of understood that. And understood that, these are the people I'm going to be working with. This is the population I'm going to be serving. This I understand. So for me, it wasn't too much of a jarring shock. It was more sort of, I recognize this, and I can work with this. And it took me a while to understand aspects of tikanga, to understand te tiriti and how people function within organizations. It took me a while to even understand the effects of colonization in New Zealand and how we've got to where we are with kind of inequalities and inequity in health, access to health and all that sort of stuff. So all those things took a while, but the approach that I took was, I'm going to be open to everything, and I'm going to learn as much as I can, and I'm going to observe as much as I can, and then I'm going to form my own opinions and form my own way of working within this framework. And so I would say, yeah, definitely it was an evolution. It went from not knowing very much to knowing a little bit to getting more experience. I feel more comfortable in Māori spaces. I feel more comfortable working in Te Ao Māori. I feel more comfortable providing a service to people that I think is culturally sensitive, yeah.
So a typical day for someone like Sandra could look like providing mental health assessment and treatment to the Auckland metro population, youth, working with the police on some days on emergency call-outs, and non-profits that provide mental health services. Since Sandra first arrived in 2007, Auckland's diversity has changed significantly. And it turns out the mental health workforce has as well, with more nurses from overseas being recruited.
The number of Zimbabwean-born nurses working in mental health has increased. And I'm very happy about that because now I have a place for peer supervision. I have people I can speak to who understand, the specific challenges that we face. Some people are coming through different routes. So some people are already qualified in their country of origin, and they come here and get some training around kind of working in New Zealand, and then they're introduced into the workforce. Some people are doing their training here, and some people are coming from so they are Zimbabwean born but have lived and worked in other countries prior to coming here. So there's kind of this whole kind of gradient of experiences and exposure. And having said all of that, the thing that we have in common is our country of origin, our culture, our language, and then our understanding of mental health and mental health issues anyway, based on what we know from back home.
When you started, it might have been a slightly more isolating experience than it might be today.
Yeah, and it was, it was actually quite isolating. It was to that point where we would go to, say, symposiums or conferences that are meant to be part of your training, and I would walk in and literally look around, just looking for somebody who looked like me, who was in this space. And I don't know whether that was like a conscious thing or just an innate, I need to see myself represented in somebody else because I don't know anyone else is doing what I'm doing. And probably I'd say for the first 6-7 years of my career, it was like that. But then I was also fortunate that I was in a metropolitan area. I wasn't sort of in provincial or rural New Zealand where things are different.
How do you mean by different?
There's less opportunity for people, particularly people who haven't done their medical training or nurse training or whatever field they're working in here in New Zealand. It just seems that little bit harder for them to get into the culture of how people here work, and that can be quite difficult.
What's been the biggest challenge in your career?
I think it would be having the trust of my colleagues or the trust of the people that I'm working with to know that I am qualified to do the job. I do know what I'm talking about when I'm trying to contribute in multidisciplinary type situations. It's not an overt thing, but you do get the sense that when you speak, you are heard in a different way to people who either are from here or trained here. And I'm not entirely sure whether that's you're a foreign person and therefore you might not understand the New Zealand context. I had to work extra hard for my opinions and my thoughts and my ideas to feel like they were being accepted and respected. Actually, my clinical opinion to be respected by my colleagues, yeah.
And how do you sit with that today after all of these years?
Well, I've grown up a bit. I've matured personally, and so there's certain things now that I just think, I have a certain level of confidence in my abilities, a certain level of confidence in my expertise, so much so that those things, I don't focus on them anymore. I've got to the point where I'm like, okay, I do deserve to be here. I do deserve to be doing this job. I am good at this job. And really my focus is serving the people I'm working with, and all this other stuff, I guess I've learned to just let it go.
Any profound interaction or profound incident in your career in New Zealand that has really shaped the way you perceive your career or how you go about performing your job?
It actually doesn't have to do with providing service to others. It has to do with when I have been in a position where I've needed care and I've needed people to come alongside me and help me to navigate things and help me to find my way through. And I'm talking about my own mental health here. When I've been on the other side of needing that is when I've realized that everybody working in this area, I'd say, I don't have any statistics, but most people working in this space are just wanting to do a good job and they're wanting to help people, and I've been the recipient of that help. And so when it just gives me a different perspective and a different lens to look through when I'm working with someone, is like, oh, I know what it feels to be sitting on that side of the table. I know what it feels to experience what may feel like a power differential between, yourself and you're the expert of your life, but somebody else telling you that actually you need to do this and you need to do that. And they might be coming from I want to help perspective, but that understanding of where someone is. So for me, it's personal experience of being on the other side of the table that was really the thing that made me think, oh, I could change the way I work within the parameters of what I'm allowed to do or not to do.
In terms of, your personal observations over the years, serving different demographics and serving different socio-economic sectors of our society in New Zealand, what would you say would be some of the more critical areas that we need to be focusing on from a personal point of view?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So everything I'm saying is obviously sort of personal opinion and what I think. I always say this: mental health, the presence of good mental health or the lack of good mental health for each individual, to me, it's more of a social issue rather than a disease or deficit issue. Therefore, I think the focus should be on providing basic needs for people. So if you think about an individual and if you think about human need and, our basic needs, we all need shelter, we all need adequate food and nutrition, we all want to feel safe, and we all want connection. Basic. If those conditions are met for individuals, then it's easier for us to work on perhaps this traumatic thing happened and how we're going to work through that, because they've got the basics. Now, what I see is a society that it's broken. There are a lot of things that are not working in terms of people being able to get these needs that are, some of these needs that I just said. And so it then becomes very difficult, services cannot meet those needs for every single individual. And so I think the huge challenge, and I think where the focus should be on, is some will call it preventative measures. I would say, let's create a society that people can actually live and work and earn enough to live decently, to be able to feel safe in their homes, to be able to provide food, nutrition, healthcare. And that sounds a little bit idealistic, but I really do think that is where the focus needs to be.
When you think about your own personal Zimbabwean background, what do you think that it is that you draw from that you can apply to your work here in New Zealand?
I think I draw from the concept of, I am because of my people. And so that means whatever work I do, whatever spaces I walk into, whatever space I take, whatever little contribution I have to any one person that I'm working with, and I'm talking about, the people that we serve, I'm bringing everything that I am to that space. And that empowers me because I know that my father, my mother, my grandmother, the people that I know and love would really understand this giving from a place of, I am not an individual, I am part of the collective, and that gives kind of a connectedness. And I do hope that shows, because then that's from there we can work together with people to move forward. And I draw on this knowing that I'm not an individual, I am part of something, or part of a people.
Sandra Szvenyika joining me in that final episode of our 4-part conversation with Black women across New Zealand. My name is Kadambri Raghukumar, and every week I bring you stories featuring people from all around the world who live in Aotearoa, New Zealand. You can find more episodes like this on all your favourite podcast platforms, as well as the RNZ website. That's rnz.co.nz/herenow, where you'll also find some videos with each episode.